Special guest this evening is Tony Brueski. And Tony and Jenny Brueski host Real Ghost Stories online every week. This show is a combination of interviews, caller-submitted ghost stories, and written ghost stories sent in by listeners all over the world. Tony and Jenny both have had a passion for the paranormal since a very young age, and this show is designed to be an outlet for those who have had a paranormal experience and want to share it with others without judgment. You can subscribe to the show via Tunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and more. And listen at www.realghoststoriesonline.com. And please welcome Tony to the show this evening. Hi there, Tony.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you tonight?
I am doing well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us here. And, of course, this is a pre-recorded show, but to everybody out there, we're wishing them a happy Halloween or Sabbath.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. So, 'tis the season.
Anytime we can say happy Halloween when it's not Halloween is a good day.
That's right, exactly. I'm very much looking forward to this interview, and I know you're a very busy man, and I've listened to your Real Ghost Stories online, which I must say are just wonderful, fabulous, incredible, and I just can't say enough positive things about them. I'd like to ask how you really got involved in this area. What really sparked your interest in getting in here, into this paranormal world?
Into the world of paranormal, I think that goes way back to my childhood, really. I mean, I'm a kid who was born in the early 80s and grew up pretty much on the original Ghostbusters. So there's two things I always wanted to do. It was be in radio, and I have audio tapes of me playing radio station starting at the age of like 2.5, and to be a Ghostbuster. And I incidentally actually have a tape that was given to me by my aunt as a gift that she had taped me pretending to interview Ghostbusters when I was about 3. So
wow.
It goes way back, and it's just, I don't know why I've always had an interest in it. We've always kind of, really celebrated Halloween around my house. My mother was always very much, let's decorate, let's have fun. And it's just been I think a real positive, happy memory for me. Mm-hmm. And it's been a way that I could combine what my career ended up being in radio and one of my passions, which is the paranormal.
Right. Well, you have a wonderful voice for radio, as we all know. Love listening to you. And, of course, Jenny's awesome as well. And speaking of Jenny, how did you all meet?
eHarmony.
Really?
eHarmony, yes. We were both just had recently gotten out of previous marriages, and then we met, and it just clicked. And
wow.
And really, paranormal really wasn't always something that we bonded over. We both knew that we had an interest in it, but it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years into our marriage when I started doing the ghost show, Real Ghost Stories Online, by myself. And then one night, she's like, can I hang out there with you? And like, yeah, you be the co-host. And she was very timid and afraid because she has no background in broadcasting. And she just, really opened up, and she's been in with us ever since. And now she's our producer and co-host, and she has such a huge role in the show.
She certainly does. The chemistry between you two is wonderful. And what I like is that there's almost like a Scully Mulder kind of combination there. It's really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and of course your dog is adorable too, by the way. I saw a little video of him.
Yes, we like to, as I said the other day, I said, let's whore him out on the videos, and because everyone loves looking at the dogs. So.
Oh, my gosh, I'm a dog person. Yeah, he's a beauty.
He's a great animal.
He's adorable. Yeah. Have you had many paranormal experiences yourselves?
Personally, I haven't had a ton. I've had a couple. I know Jen, it's a funny story. Jen, I think, has had a much more life-changing one than I had, and she didn't really realize it was paranormal until one episode when we were sitting there talking about it. It was early on in her hosting days with the show, so a little more than a year ago, and we were talking about imaginary friends. I don't know if we had a story or a caller or something talking about them, and something was alluded to along the lines of not everyone actually sees their imaginary friend. And for those of us who had imaginary friends that weren't ghosts, we're aware of that fact. we know that imaginary friends, you normally don't see them. It's just you're pretending. And then she started talking about it in the vein of, well, no, I mean, everybody sees. I saw mine. You what? You actually saw your... And then she described him down to a T, and she really started thinking about it, and we ended up getting a lot more stories about that topic, and she came to the conclusion that her imaginary friend was a ghost as a child, and she had it for a couple years, and then one day he told her that he had to move away to Oklahoma. And that was the
Wow.
end of that. Nothing, paranormal, like things weren't moving around the house. The parents didn't see it. There was nothing, nefarious about it, but it was just a little boy ghost. And we did a little research on it last year, and the area that she grew up in Texas actually had a school tragedy. I believe there was a fire, and it's been a while since we've talked about this, so forgive me, I don't remember all the exact details, but there was a tragedy back in the early part of the 1910-ish, where a school had, I believe, blew up, and it killed hundreds of kids. And her imaginary friend dressed in the attire of that day. So it's not to say that this is a ghost of a child from that school, but if you want to, connect some dots and make some conclusions or educated guesses, that's what she thinks it may be from, or the origins of that ghost. Me personally, I had. There's one experience that I talk about because it's really one of my only experiences that I had, and that was living in Wausau, Wisconsin. I lived there for about 2 years, working in radio, and it's a very haunted city. Lots of old buildings, lots of history, lots of repurposed old buildings in their downtown, and that's where I lived. In a little apartment. Very not spooky apartment, totally refurbished, brand new looking and everything, but it was in a very, very old building. And behind the wall of where I had my bedroom was a stairwell. And there was always a story of people seeing a woman carrying a child up and down the stairwell, like an apparition of some sort. I myself had never seen it and have never seen it. But that was a story that I was aware of in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one night I had woken up and it was sleep paralysis essentially, and I could not move. But it wasn't just the feeling of not moving; it was the feeling as if there was something moving through me. Now, I know there's always the old hag thing that people talk about where people say they see an old woman sitting on them or whatever. There's plenty of shadow people. There's a gazillion stories with that. But I just had this feeling that there was the only way I can describe it is it felt like there was a cloud that moved from the interior of my room directly through me out into that wall, essentially, where on the opposite side was that stairwell. Where people tend to say that they see that woman carrying the child.
Wow.
Now, was it just sleep paralysis? It very well could have been. I don't know. But you had a couple other pieces of information in there that I learned about that led me to think maybe there was more to that. Maybe that, in fact, was a paranormal experience because there was some external parts to it. I wasn't just like at, a days in and had sleep paralysis. It was very specific. So those are the two main ones that we've had. She had one and I had one. I think I saw an apparition last year on a West Bend ghost walk way up in a clock tower for a brief moment. But that was a very, very fleeting moment.
Wow, so it sounds like your psychic ability or your psychic vision is activated to some degree. I mean, you are seeing things beyond physical.
Yeah, I think Jenny is a lot more in as far as in tune with psychic abilities, if you will, and I don't think psychic ability would be the right word for her. I think empath is more of what she views herself as. And me, I don't really feel like I'm super sensitive. She'll be the one that picks up on things a lot faster than I will. And it's an interesting thing to talk about when you talk about people seeing things and not seeing things. I guess it's all up for debate, but I think some people see things and some people don't. I would probably put myself in the category of, for the most part, I don't see things. But that was the one time I actually did.
Right. Well, I think that's a protection for you to some degree, considering where you are in the field right now and how many callers you get. I would say that's probably best. Otherwise, you'd be bombarded with all sorts of impressions and signatures. I can imagine. Does your house ever get hitchers from some of the calls that you receive?
No, not that I'm aware of. And that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we talk about this a lot, and people are like, hey, are you going to go on any ghost investigations? No. We're going to sit here in the comfort of our studio and let you tell us about yours.
That's great. And what's nice... Go ahead.
I said, that's about as close as we're going to get.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good because to me it would seem like when you have all these people contacting you, the energetic bleed through would be some anomalous activity in your home or something strange. So I'm really glad to hear that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I was a thought that came to mind as we started the show, and I thought, well, here goes nothing. Let's see what happens. And thankfully, nothing has ever occurred. There's been some moments where you feel a little eerie when you hear some things, and we can talk about that a little bit. To some of the stuff that we've heard on some of the calls that we've gotten. It's been some very odd occurrences and odd stories. I did have one moment in my life when I was doing the show. It was a time when my grandfather was passing, and he was in hospice care, and we knew it was any day at that point. And when I was just doing the show, Jenny wasn't on it yet, and I was recording one night. I was the only one at home, and I thought I had heard like the door in the other room slam or something, and I was thinking, maybe it's, my grandpa saying goodbye or something, but he was still alive. He made it for another couple of weeks.
Wow.
But it was I don't know what it was, if it was the dog or what the deal was in the other room, but that was, the only thing I had heard. And I can write that off to wind. I can write it off to air pressure changes because there really hasn't been anything else that's gone on.
Right. A logical explanation. Well, both you and Jenny appear very grounded, which is really nice. You're not in the, la la land. You actually have a very anchored, energetic about it. I like that. That's really good. So can you elaborate a little bit on some of the calls you've received?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah.
We've had quite a few, obviously, and far too many to mention. But some of them that have really stood out to us, and that what I was kind of alluding to earlier with some rather disturbing or just odd feelings that you get when you're talking to someone or listening to their stories, which is what we do most of the time. We had a caller in Chattanooga, and he's become known as Richard in Chattanooga. And that's just simply how we always begin his call. Hey, Tony and Jenny, it's Richard in Chattanooga. And I have never actually spoken with him one-on-one. He's emailed the show. He's called the show. And he began telling us a story about his home and very weird energy that was in it, and things that were essentially kind of terrorizing his children, terrorizing his wife, causing mood changes in his wife, really wreaking havoc with their marriage, and just very dark energy that he was feeling around the house. And it was very, very negative. And we get those types of calls all the time, but he called in with a series of calls, and every time it kind of escalated a little bit as far as it was more so almost psychological havoc that it was wreaking on his family with the things that it was doing. Not so much, bloody toothed, monster that's making itself known and freaking the hell out of everyone, but more so just really sedate, slowly wearing that family down to nothing. And at one point he called us and he was sharing his story, and suddenly, and I don't recall exactly what he was saying at the moment, but it fit in perfectly when he was speaking about this entity that he was curious or thought may be haunting. There was a pause in his words, just a very brief, and you could tell it was not on purpose pause, but you heard what I described as the sound of like a patio door opening and wind rushing through it like on an autumn night. That's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like he was sitting next to a patio door and suddenly the shh came through, and then he continued talking. Didn't even recognize that the sound ever happened. And I asked him then, we talked about it on the show, and he called back and said, no, I was laying on my couch. Nothing happened. There was no noise here. But it was such an eerie sound that it really made his story stand out to us more than others. And then we started getting people calling in and telling us that they were feeling sick to their stomach when they heard that noise. And what made me realize that this wasn't people just jumping on a bandwagon of, hey, we heard somebody said they got sick to their stomach. How about you? We didn't report that part of the response for a couple weeks. I just wanted to see if more listeners were going to share the same thing.
Wow.
And it wasn't up on a forum. It wasn't on a message board. It wasn't on a comment. It was just emails directly into the show saying, hey, I was really intrigued by the Richard story again, but that set noise, they all reported feeling this very just sick to their stomach feeling when they heard it. And it is eerie, of course, but people getting like physically ill over it. That was really one of, I think, the more disturbing moments that we've had on the show. Richard went on later to tell us that he found a box in his mother's attic that had some symbolic images on it, and I couldn't tell you exactly what they are because I'm not good at that. But and there has been a lot of debate about what they meant, and there's been people on both sides of it saying, well, that's actually a symbol of good, and some saying yes, but it can be used as a symbol of evil or negativity. So it's really in the eye of the beholder as far as what you're going to view it as. But he found these symbols on the box, and he realized that he had a tattoo of that exact symbol that his mother had gotten him as a child. And within that box were a lot of books of, for lack of a better term, spells, and not so positive, not so positive type spells.
Oh, like hexes and things.
Yes, exactly. It wasn't like anything positive in the world.
Bad mojo.
Or anything like that. It was more so like, this is bad shit. And he didn't, there was some pictures of his mother, I guess in some sort of, if I recall this right, I believe there was pictures of his mother, in, various ceremonies and things that I don't know what they were. He didn't know what they were, but it all kind of had a negative connotation to it. And then he was wondering, well, what is going on here? Because his mother, I guess, knew about all of the paranormal activity. He was sending his kids to go live with his mother because it got so bad within their house. And then he's finding this in her attic. And he's wondering if something happened where he or she at some point had put some sort of a hex or a curse or something on him, and for whatever reason has never told him about it. And I believe there was another boy that he was really close childhood friends with, like almost like a brother, close enough where the mother could also get him a tattoo at the same time without parental consent. And he also had this tattoo, and I guess they met up as adults and discussed their lives, and they both had quite a few, negative paths that they had gone down or things that had come to them, not necessarily by their own doing or by their choice, but just that seemed to have followed them throughout their life.
Yeah.
And that's where it was left. We've asked him to call in again. We've asked, for more updates, but we have never heard back again from him. We did recently get a call from someone. It was a very brief, very weird call, and you can take it for what it's worth, but it was just a man saying, I know Richard, and without saying a whole lot about who I am or how I know him, you can take him at his word. It's not a good situation that he's been in, and that was it.
Wow. Well,
it's like, okay.
Yeah, it sounds like some conjuring was done on behalf of the mother and maybe perhaps a bleed-through effect onto them. But, what comes to mind is maybe spell reversal or spell breaking or something to disconnect that psychic bond, which it sounds like is what he has to some degree. That's just my own take anyway.
Sure. Could that be done, though, without knowing what it was? I don't know anything about that. That's my question. If he came to us and said, hey, I believe there is a spell on me, can that be reversed without him knowing who put it on or what spell was put on? Right.
I think it can, intuitively speaking. I believe there are more powerful forces, but that's just me.
Okay.
But yeah, that's amazing. That's kind of creepy and weird. And yeah, I can imagine this. You talk about frequency making people sick, and what comes to mind is like the movie The Exorcist that had a really bad vibe to it. Nobody likes the vibration of that movie. The signature. There's something evil, or I don't know if you want to call it evil, but definitely disturbing about the transmission. And speaking of transmissions, how much work have you done in decoding EVPs?
Not a ton. I really don't go out and capture them or anything of that nature. We've had a couple shows on where we've listened to some EVPs and discussed them. I am horrible unless it's like staring me in the face as to what the hell I'm hearing. It has to be pretty much like, okay, this is an EVP, Tony, and now I'm about to say boo. Like, oh, that one said boo. And then it had a little disclaimer at the beginning. But other than that, I can hear something, but I'm really not good at deciphering it unless it hits me in the head.
That makes sense. That really makes sense. And for people who want to call in, let's talk a little bit about your website, of course, and some of the information. How can people call in to leave a message pertaining to their ghostly experiences?
Yeah, we have a phone number that people can call in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and leave us their ghost story. That's because we are a pre-recorded podcast. We don't do a live show. That's how we take callers, and people can call at their leisure and share their story. And the phone number for that is 855-853-4802. And they simply call in. They have about 12 minutes or so to leave a story, and then we go through and make sure it's listenable, and then if it is, we put it on the show. So they can do it that way, or they can also write into our website. Right on the site, there's a form to fill out, and that's at realghoststoriesonline.com.
That's awesome. And how often do you get people to call you? I mean, what's the percentage per week?
Oh God, a lot.
Really? Wow.
It varies. We probably get, Jenny is the one. Her full-time job is producing our show. She quit her regular job to do this, and she is the one who goes through all of the calls and goes through all of the stories and essentially curates the show. So from what I see when I take a look at what the current numbers are, I'd say on average we probably get about 20 calls a day. And then as far as stories, you're probably a little bit higher than that. And as far as the write-ins go, we're probably 25, 30 stories come in a day. And we don't say, okay, out of these 25 calls or 20 calls and 25 stories, we only can pick so many. We just essentially have a backlog, and we just kind of dig our way to the top and go through what's usable. If it's usable, we use it. And if it's not, then we just have to, set it to the side.
Well, that's a good way to look at things. And I know I heard you first on Dark Matter Digital Network, which of course I host two shows. One is called Hyperspace. But yeah, awesome. I must say, if people have not heard of you, and I can't imagine anybody who hasn't, please tune in because you all are wonderful. I just love listening to your show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty picky about listening to ghost stories. So
thank you. The whole reason I decided to do the show was we were doing some home improvement projects around here, and I always love listening to the old Art Bell episodes, the Ghost to Ghost episodes on Halloween, because that's obviously just my interest. So I would be doing, ripping out tile or something, and I'd be just listening to an old episode of that, and I just thought, I really wish there was like a podcast in that vein. There's a lot of paranormal podcasts out there, but so many of them are very, very technical in nature, very much for the ghost hunter, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I wasn't that person. Like, I don't really watch Ghost Adventures all that much or those shows. I'm just not interested so much in the technical angle. I like the unsolved mysteries, lifestyle angle of it and how it actually affects people.
Right.
And I thought, why don't I do it? I can do it. Podcasting exists now. The platform is actually here to do the show I've always wanted to do. So one day I was like, well, let's try it. And I just started putting it out there, and amazingly people started listening.
Yeah, your voice, the music in the background you use, everything, your combination, the chemistry with you and Jenny, everything's perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah, it really is. It's really interesting because you all just embrace what's going on. You just receive what information these people want to leave on the phone with pertaining to their ghost stories. But there's none of this, I don't know. I like to say that Hollywood tends to make it exaggerated. There's none of that going on. You break it down on a very logical level once again, and I do like the way you guys perceive things and view it.
Thank you. Yeah, really we just kind of view, not everything is a ghost story, and you need to look at it that way because sometimes there are logical explanations, and sometimes it very well is a ghost story, and it's not necessarily just to be written off with carbon monoxide poisoning,
right. Exactly.
But if that's a possibility, it should be considered. That's
right.
kind of how we look at it.
Well, it seems to me that some people, the more they focus on the paranormal or ghosts, the more they'll attract it through their own psychic energy. Would you say that's true? Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I really do agree. And we have a lot of listeners who have actually told us, they found our show and they just started listening and they didn't stop listening. And suddenly they felt that there was more things going on around them. Some of them, physically did have things happen. They were seeing things that they normally did not see or experience, and they were wondering if it's because they were surrounding themselves with our show so much, and the topic and the idea and just, the energy of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I can see that they probably get amplified to some degree or spook themselves. Do you remember that movie, The Ghost of Mr. Chicken? Did you ever see that?
Oh, years ago, yes. It's been so long.
This reminds me. It's a classic, corny old movie, but when you think about it, it's really cute. And
it is.
Yeah, I just think of that often. But what is the spookiest haunt you think you've heard? You've mentioned the one, but is there anything else that really comes to mind that's really, yeah?
There's, I have two that come to mind. One of them was a woman who had called in, and this was earlier on in the broadcast, and we were getting far fewer calls a day. So we were more limited on material, and we couldn't be as picky as we are today as far as what we need to put on and what we don't need to put on. And it was actually at a point where I wasn't even screening the calls. I was just, hey, let's press play on whatever shows up. And we did it for a little while because it was such in its infancy. And one of them that we got, and today it probably wouldn't even make the air, because the audio quality was so horrible. But we didn't realize that it wasn't the person doing what we thought they were doing. It sounded like a woman was telling a story, essentially, of like a demon in her home. Just things, cupboards, making noise, things going out of place, very dark figures, very just negative energy associated with them, things scaring her children. It was not good. It was just a very, very dark situation. But for the life of me, it was so hard to hear her story because it sounded like she was putting dishes away the entire time she was telling the story. Wow. Literally, the clinking of dishes, like you're putting into the cupboard. And it got to the point where I was like, how many damn dishes does this person have? Because it's like, this is a 6-minute story, and it just kept going. Like, maybe she's working at a restaurant. I don't know. But it was so distracting. And I felt bad because I used that call as an example, saying, okay, here's an example of a story that was probably pretty good, but I can't even tell you what it's about because I was so damn distracted by that. When you call into the show, please be in a place where there's not a lot of noise, where the radio's not on, where we're not on in the background, or whatever, and we can hear your story. It's the old, talk radio, please turn your radio down. But in podcasting, it's, whatever the person may randomly be doing. And no one's there to tell them to stop. Well, I said that on the air, and I was kind of mean about it, and I felt bad about that. But I was trying to make a point just for future callers. And then we get a call back the next day from her. I wasn't putting away dishes. I wasn't doing anything. I was sitting here telling the story. So some sound was coming through on this call. And it really seemed like was trying to prevent the story from getting out.
Wow.
It's how I took it. And it was just very, very odd. And her next call sounded a bit better. And I know what audio interference sounds like. I know what digital interference sounds like. And that happens on calls. That's a normal thing. We all have cell phones that have bad connections every now and then. But this was not that. This audibly sounded like there was something there, like an analog sound that was on the other end, right with her, producing this noise, because it was one-on-one with her voice right in the background, and she said that she was doing nothing. So we take our callers at their word. Later on, we got an email from her friend updating us on her, because she kind of just withdrew, and we were nice. We heard a little bit more of her story, and our relationship was fine. She didn't hate us for me scolding, but for whatever reason, she withdrew. I think she wanted to maybe stop talking about the incidents so much, and we got an email from her friend saying that she, for a while, became very despondent, would just go up to her attic and just stare at the window by herself, almost very possession-like.
Right.
And it got really spooky, for lack of a better term. And so we had a lot of people giving her advice and putting stuff up on our forum section or just calling in and giving, words of wisdom and whatnot. I believe everything did eventually calm down for her. I don't know exactly what she did to resolve the situations, but they did apparently somewhat resolve for her. So that was another somewhat spooky moment on the show where you're actually getting audio you can't explain. Call it an EVP or whatever you want. And a lot of people just kind of refer to that because it kind of is. If it was really electronically picked up, technically I think it would fall into that.
Right.
Some people were saying they could pick up a voice here and there in the background. I didn't do that. I didn't pick it up, but I'm not saying that it wasn't there because I know I'm bad at that. So that was one of our more disturbing calls.
Wow. It sounds like you need an exorcism hotline.
Yeah, we really should. We should have one on call and here's our exorcist on call today.
I say that kiddingly, but it seems to me like there is an escalation and I don't want to say possession, but there's something going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. If there's just more outlets now where people are able to share these stories where they couldn't in the past, and they were left to either going to, their church or to whoever they thought was going to be able to help them. And in a lot of cases, they got no help there. But now there's actually this forum and this community out there that you can openly share these things, anonymously or with recognition, whatever you want, and get advice from people who have been through similar situations. So I don't know if there's actually an escalation or, like I said, if it's just people are realizing that this exists now and that this platform didn't ever exist in the past.
Right.
We had another story that really freaked me out, and it's from one of our frequent writers and callers. His name is Oscar, and he's Oscar in Dallas is what he goes by. And he has several just extremely creepy stories. And there's a lot of debate, are Oscar stories real, are they not? I don't know. We take all of our callers and our letters and our listeners' stories as real at their word. That's what we do. We're not here to judge whether it's real or fake, unless I can tell it's a 8-year-old that's giggling between sentences when they're calling in. This story of his was a childhood story. He grew up in Mexico, and he told us that there was a parade, some sort of celebration was going on, and there was a clown car. Now, of course, everyone loves clowns. And the clown car was going down the street with the parade, and it had an accident in front of his building, his home. And him and his family were watching it through the upstairs windows. And he saw the accident, and he saw these people were trampled, they were run over, they were dead. They were clearly not alive anymore, the clowns, after this accident. And, the police came, the medical staff came, and they hauled them all away, the bodies and the remains of these people. And, traumatic enough, but it got worse from there. He said later that night, it was him and his cousins, and they were having a bit of a sleepover in one of the rooms in the same apartment that they had seen the clown tragedy take place. And if my memory serves me right, they started hearing this noise out in the entry to the apartment, and then they looked through the keyhole. And, I'm picturing the old skeleton keyhole where you can see right through, which probably is what it was, if you're able to see through it that well. And he said that he looked through it, and he saw what appeared to be a clown, like one of the bloodied, disfigured clowns that was in the accident earlier that day, rummaging through the house, not like trying to steal anything, but more so stumbling through the house, comes up to the door, taunts the kids for a bit, makes some threats at them, and just scares them all to death, and eventually leaves. I don't remember exactly how he left or why it left, but but it was a story that was filled with such frightening imagery, and he tells it much better. We have that episode is up. There's a couple versions of that story. One where I'm reading his account to us, and then we actually had him on the show last Halloween as a bonus hour, and he shared that story in his own words and several other stories that he had. A lot of them from his time growing up in Mexico.
Wow.
It's the very bizarre things that have happened to him and his family. A man with a very haunted life, if his stories are in fact all real. And I think that happens. I think there's a lot of people who in fact do lead very haunted lives.
I agree.
And it's one of those things where people dismiss, go, oh, people couldn't have that many things happen to them. No, there are people who unfortunately do. You probably don't want to be them, but I believe there's plenty that for whatever reason lead haunted lives.
Right, and especially with that situation where there's a traumatic event that happens, I would suspect there's some kind of a portal that opens when they die, and of course maybe some disorientation when the person transfers, and maybe that's why there was all that creepy clown activity. Wow, that's really, I don't care for clowns, and I know many people don't. So yeah, that's an extra icing on the cake, shall we say?
It combined some of my favorite spooky imagery, where it's clowns, zombies,
right.
Halloween. It was just like everything all in one, and I was like, oh, this is just like the perfect cornucopia of a ghost story. And it's one of those weird things where on our show, we have these people that tell us these life-changing stories and these experiences that changed them as people to their core because they were so either traumatic or just shocking or whatever you want to call it. Some are very positive too. Some are seeing a dead relative and getting a message. But it really changes their outlook on the world and our whatever you want to call it, galaxy, life, anything, our universe, that we live in. And for the most part, whenever we get one that's just like over the top, oh my God, this is just so horribly scary. I can't believe, they're not institutionalized after this, because I would be if I went through that. I don't think I'd be able ever to like talk straight again. Our reaction is always, wow, that was a great story. And it's really like, wow, that was really the horrible moment in someone's life. But to us, it's a great story.
Right. And it seems to me like it heals them to some degree to be able to relay it to you and then share it with the listeners, right?
Yeah, I mean, that really is kind of what it's about. And we don't say that in any sort of malice or in any sort of discounting way, like, hey, give us your horrible experience and let's, whore it out or anything. Right. It's more so, it's just, people come to us, with these stories, and a lot of times they've not told this story to anyone. Or the few people that they have told it to, they kind of got some strange looks, and it was like, okay, yeah, you're pretty normal, except you think this happened to you. And they don't ever get that, confirmation or just that empathetic other person that can go, yeah, I've been through that. Or yes, we believe this happened to you. We don't know why it happened to you. We don't know how it happened to you. We don't think you saw it, in your mind. We actually believe that what you're telling us is real. And a lot of people never find that
right.
until our show. And the community that it's kind of organically, come up with. And that's really a neat thing. We used to joke about it being, oh gosh, what did we call it? And we stopped calling it that because people were like, oh, that's too doctorish or something. Oh. It was like therapy for the paranormally affected or something of that nature. Group therapy for the paranormally affected. That's what we call it. And it was just kind of a little slogan line. It was just kind of funny. And we just kind of made it up one day off the cuff because it really is kind of how it feels sometimes, right? With people coming together, sharing their stories, and we get callers that follow up and go, hey, so-and-so is talking about this. I had something similar happen to me. Here's how I dealt with it. And it really is this community that interacts either through the calls or through the letters or through our forum section on our website. A lot of people interact there as well. So it's really this, this world of people who don't know each other, but they all share similar experiences. And the reality is when it comes to paranormal, there's just so many extremes when it comes to paranormal experiences and differences that it's hard to say, or easily find someone who had, a shadow person in a, New York City high-rise apartment that looked like the Easter Bunny. But it happens to be that someone else had the same thing happen to them 20 years earlier, and then they're going to, get together and share their story. Where it's very, oddly similar experiences, and we can kind of connect those through the show.
Yeah, I think that's really important that people get to share their experiences. And of course, you can subscribe to the archives that you all offer, right?
Yeah, we have this thing, and because we are, like your show, we are a listener-supported show. Every once in a while, there's an advertiser or something, but that's few and far between. It's certainly not enough to support the show. So what we do is we ask our listeners to support it if they like it. And what we do is we put out an extra episode every single week that goes out to our EPPs. We call them extra podcast people. Obviously a play on EVP. And for $5 a month, they get access to all of our EPP episodes, which we're up to almost 60 of them now. In fact, I think by the time this airs, it will be past 60. And they also get access to all those, a brand new one every single week. And to be completely honest, we do try and save some of the best stories that we get for the week for our EPPs, because those are the folks that are keeping this show alive. Without them, it wouldn't exist, and I think it's only right to save something special for them to encourage their support so everyone can enjoy the show. And it's only $5 a month, so I think it's fair.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great deal.
Yeah, they get that. They get all the access to the archives. We do exclusive video material where it's me and Jenny talking about stuff, Ask Tony and Jenny. We've done some very not true investigations, more so documentary-esque type style investigations. One of a haunted airport here in Wichita where we live. And they can watch that. It's like a half-hour piece we produced. And access to some of the archive episodes that have fallen off iTunes because we've created so many episodes now. They're not all there anymore. So there's lots of ways to get extra ghost stories and help keep this thing afloat.
That's awesome. Have you been approached by any of the television stations, anything in mainstream for a series?
No, not as of yet.
Okay.
I was approached. I was on the Travel Channel a while back I used to do a food blog before the ghost thing. I know, completely different. But, I did, host a show on Travel Channel for a short period of time, but it was about food, nothing about ghosts.
Right.
But I see that probably as something that may come up, down the line a little bit.
I see it too, because I tell you what, I usually have really good instincts about people and energy and the way they express themselves, and I can tell you guys are there's something about both of you. I think that good things are down the path for you guys.
Yeah, we're excited about, all, just the future of this thing, because it's really, it started as a hobby and it's really become our life and our livelihood. And it's so fun doing, what you love and being able to talk about what you love and just get so much, fulfillment out of it. I mean, and the best part of that comes from the people who are really getting some sort of therapeutic value out of this, right. and really feeling a connection and feeling like they either got something off their chest or they got some answers to what's been going on for them. And one of the things we've talked about probably down the line a bit once our little ones grow up a bit older, because they're still pretty little, so we're not doing a whole lot of traveling right now. Right. But once they get a bit older, probably looking at doing some traveling, maybe some speaking engagements and things of that nature in different areas of the country. And certainly once the audience is even larger too, that'll make that even a more applicable thing to do. Right.
I know when I listen to you guys late at night or something, it's really nice because most people, I don't know, there's just something about your presence and the way you relay the data, the way you communicate the ghost stories. It's very peaceful, even though it's the disturbing kind of information, but it's very peaceful by the way you relay it. So I think there's a nice, once again, it's that energetic that's associated with the way you approach this whole area, which is really nice.
Yeah, I try to keep it, somewhat lighthearted. We're not the hardcore. We're going to talk about the 401 5000 PKE meter and all of that stuff. Right. It's just like, and we get some flack for that too sometimes. But my answer is, well, we're not that show. We are where it's kind of like a morning show that talks about ghosts. Like I take it seriously, but as with anything, you have to find humor in some of this because it's such a dark topic otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And then fear attracts more negativity, in my opinion, it's a block. So yeah, I would say stay positive about it and approach it the way you do, for sure. Yeah. Now, have you heard a lot of tales about ghosts related to electricity and power lines?
Yes, we have had quite a few stories of that, and like connecting to not only power lines but like lights outside, like street lights and things of that nature, turning on and off, whether that be some sort of activity that the individual possesses, be a magnetism of some sort, or I don't know. I know the term slider has been thrown out there with that. I've heard of just the fact that being underneath power lines and stuff, just being the conduit that it is also could possibly increase your likelihood of having a haunting in your home, just because of the extra energy that is right there with it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. And of course, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the other things when we're talking about power and electricity and big things of that nature, I've worked in radio stations my whole life, and several of them, when you have these massive transmitters that, are just, pumping out everything, and God knows what sort of horrible ailment I'm going to have later in life from working in these buildings for so long. Those buildings also, for whatever reason, I've had, weird things happen in them, or have had other people report paranormal activity within those buildings, the radio stations themselves.
That's interesting. So I wonder if they're hopping on the radio signal or something, or maybe the electricity.
I think it's just the electricity. I think it could be, it doesn't necessarily need a signal. I think a lot of it's just the sheer amount of electricity that's being pumped through something.
That's amazing to me. Wow. And it makes you wonder how many people that are quote unquote haunted in the illusion of haunted or have like some kind of a wormhole in their aura that are drawing in the experience. Do you ever think of things like that or no?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's nothing off limits, and the funny thing is, the more we talk about it and the more we discuss, could it be this, could it be that, the more questions I have. There's not, this show has not made me understand the paranormal any better. It's made me have more questions than ever before, because I realize if you look at the family tree of ghosts, it just gets bigger and bigger with every show, because there's not like all one shadow person, I believe, or one type of shadow person. There's not, all one type of sleep paralysis experience. There's not all one type of orb. There's not all one type of this or that. And it keeps going and going and going, and then you have these things with combinations of things happening that it just gets extremely confusing, but extremely intriguing at the same time.
Mm-hmm, right. Do you think there's more activity this time of year around Halloween than usually another time of year? Do you think because they say the veils are so thin, that have you noticed more activity, people calling more or having more experiences?
Well, from a marketing standpoint, I know we're going to get more calls around Halloween just because the general public is more interested in the topic right now. Right. So it just becomes busy season, as I call it. But as far as actual occurrences, yeah, I think it does increase, but I think some of that has to do with people not knowing what they're doing and dabbling in things they don't understand. Because it seems like the fun thing to do. Let's go get the pink Ouija board from the Toys R Us and have a pizza party.
Right. And
then the next thing the dog's in the other room missing a limb. It's
right.
it's one of those things where there's a heightened interest in it, and I think there's people, like I said, dabbling in things they don't understand, and I think they inadvertently conjure some things up this time of the year. And so you have that. There's of course also people who are purposely conjuring things up this time of year that know exactly what they're doing as well. I just think you have the perfect storm of both going on right now.
Right. Now, once again, it's like it's how you use the energy and what you do and what I call a ritual. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are happening. And also you have to take the paranormal and any form of mysticism or whatever you want to call it seriously. You can't dabble in things. I think that's true. I mean, would you drive down into a city somewhere where it's super saturated with people and just go out and summon everybody to interact with? I mean,
no.
It's the same thing, really. It's a universal highway with a lot of spirits and whatever's out there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where people, they may have the best of intents, and that's where I think it starts out for a lot of people, especially when they don't know what they're doing. I don't think most people who get a Ouija board or make a Ouija board or whatever they're doing are doing or having a seance or whatever you want to call it, whatever ritual they're performing. A lot of them are not doing it with a malice or a negative intent. A lot of them are actually, they're trying to talk to their dead brother or uncle or grandpa or whatever. You insert individual here who's dead. And they inadvertently are conjuring something else up that is trying to either take that shape or form, or they just opened a door and didn't realize that you're not going to talk to that person, but you did open the door for whoever happens to be near it right now,
right.
And that's who you're going to get, like it or not.
Right. And they have friends.
Yeah, and they don't know how to close the door either.
Right.
That's something we get a lot too, where it's like, okay, so you performed this. You didn't really know what you were doing. You got it started, but you also never ended it either. And now these things are here. So yeah,
right.
it's one of those
and
deals.
At that point, it would seem to me like they would have to seal their aura and bless the home or do some kind of consecration. That's just my own take. Do you offer, once again, obviously you brainstorm about this. You have a group that kind of communicates and shares information.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and that's why we're introducing new Demon Away. For only $19.95, you can get your very own bottle of Demon Away.
Is this for real?
No, it's not.
Because I know there's a girlfriend of mine has Ghoul Be Gone, and that's for real.
God, it exists.
It does.
Is it like sage oil or something?
It's something with all kinds of moldavite and different kinds of crystals
No,
and people like it. I have some.
I wouldn't doubt that it works. I mean, it's one of those things because people always talk about saging their home or, different cultures and different, religions have different remedies, if you will, that they will use for ridding a home or blessing a home or purifying a home. And I asked about it initially, seriously, but in a tongue-in-cheek way. Just because, I hear people talking about saging a home and I'm thinking of stuffing a turkey, because it's a concept I really wasn't that familiar with. And I thought, so would stuffing work too? Or, does at Thanksgiving, are you less demons or because and I'm not trying to downplay anyone's experience, but I'm just wondering how does this work? And oh no, it's a different type of sage and this okay, I get it. That makes sense. Not all water is holy water.
But you're actually right, Tony, because sage when you ingest it is a purifier. So
yeah.
No, you're right. And so is rosemary.
Yeah, it's all in the same family. I'm thinking, are they that discerning? Are the demons oh, I'm sorry, you got the run-of-the-mill Pepperidge Farm sage stuffing. We really wanted that organic one that was put together by Thomas Keller, and I'm sorry, this is not going to work for us. So we're just going to stick around for the holidays.
No GMOs, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, GMO free. No, I'm sorry, it's not going to be the good one. So it was one of those questions, and I asked about it, and I said, well, what about, instead of, having the sage, what about the, getting an essential oil out of it? Essentially, that's what you're spreading. Could you do that? And then could you, make a spray bottle and call it Demon Away?
Actually, you know what? There's a market for that, so go for it. If you feel guided to, go for it, because it does sell. And whether it's a psychological thing where they just want to have something to spray emotionally, or I do know that it does neutralize space. It can't hurt. That's for darn sure.
Yeah,
so that's my take.
I'm not opposed to it whatsoever. It was just one of those things where I kind of said it as a joke, and then shortly after that, I got all these emails with links to all these products that essentially are exactly what I just talked about.
Okay, so you and Jenny have a mission. You have to come up with your own.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting into the Demon Away product business anytime soon, but you never know.
Demon Be Gone, sure. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to end up getting sued by Monsanto or something. Nope, we got the patent for that seed over here. So
That's great. Oh, it's so good to talk to you, and I know we're going to get ready to wrap this up pretty soon, but is there anything else you want to touch base on? I heard you talk about Haunted Halifax. I thought that was phenomenal. That was a really good show.
Thank you. Yeah, that was just information I kind of conjured up online just by doing some research. We had when we got married, actually, we took a nice morbid cruise up to the New England area, and one of the sites on our cruise was actually the burial site of a lot of the Titanic survivors, and so because that's what everyone wants to do on their honeymoon. But we, for us, actually, it was kind of funny because going back to Titanic, we've talked about this on the show. We one day going through an antique store and found a placard about the Titanic, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I was obsessed with Titanic as a kid," and I was I think it was probably watching the National Geographic Robert Ballard specials when he found it. I became super crazily fixated on it, to an extent. Now I'd probably be medicated if I was a child. If they did what they do today to children, back then, I'm sure they would have thought there was something wrong with me. I just called it an interest, and I was really into it, and Jenny was also extremely fixated and interested in the Titanic, and this is all pre-Titanic movie and everything like that. We were just very much drawn to this for whatever reason. And so we just had this fixation on it. And when we were trying to figure out where we wanted to go for our honeymoon, there was a Caribbean for a cruise, there was this and that, but then there was a New England one, and it went up to, Halifax area in Canada, and we get to see like some of the artifacts from Titanic. And so we did that. And we got to see part of there's pieces of the grand staircase that they actually recovered from Titanic that are there, and a deck chair and some other stuff. And it's a very interesting museum, very weird energy in there. Like even I picked up on it. She definitely picked up on it. And then there's also the gravesite where they put up all the remains that they recovered from the Titanic there as well. So it was a town with one heck of a storied history, being the place where the boats came in that recovered what was left of Titanic, and the Halifax disaster, which I was completely unaware of. I don't know if it was the American public school system failing us or me just not paying attention in history, but I don't ever recall learning about the Halifax disaster. And it was pretty damn bad, where the shipping there was 2 shipping containers that exploded with munitions, and essentially it was like a nuclear bomb went off, and Halifax is on a large hill. And if you were on the side of the hill, which went down to the river, you would probably be dead if it happened, because it wiped it out, and the pictures look like something out of World War II in Japan. And then the other side of the hill was what was left. But that is a town that, so many people just instantly died, and there's a lot of weird energy there, and a lot of very dark stories of that point in time.
Right.
Made for a great episode.
Well, absolutely. I was going to say, Tony, we're getting ready to wrap this up. I must say it's been a pleasure to interview you tonight, and I know you're a very busy man, so thank you so much for joining us. It's been a special treat.
Thank you for having me. I'd love
pleasure.
to come back again if you'd like.
Yeah, I do want you to come back big time, so make sure you do that. And, of course, if Jenny's available as well. And, of course, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And please stay tuned for Shiny Us Out with David Dundramecki coming up next to send you on us tonight from Down Under. And I guess what they say is a happy haunting. Is that it this time of year?
It's become the saying, happy haunting, everyone, yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tony. I wish you and Jenny a very safe and happy haunting with your family.
You too.
Thank you.